Yeah, you definitely tried, Bernice. Um, if you've been on Facebook this morning, you've seen I've gone on a bit of a rant. I'm not sure why. I woke up this morning and I felt like a bit of a rant. And I want to now rant it in this format. So just be aware, it is a rant. So forgive me and give me the heads up. And I'm giving you the heads up to know that be prepared. So here's my rant. I'm actually going to read you what I wrote on Facebook, and then I'm going to explain myself. Because I'll be honest, it's really getting to me. I wrote the following. It's time for faith to stop being a defendant. For 2 centuries, atheism has been the prosecutor and faith the defendant. Faith has always defending itself. We're not really crazy. ISIS doesn't represent us. It's not really a contradiction to science. Yes, of course, the most important thing is to be a good person, but you know that's Megillah. Now, here's the problem. Honestly, I cannot believe that atheism, moral relativism, and the modern culture of the West still feel justified to be on the offensive. They have failed us dismally. Whether Hitler, Stalin, Kim Jong-un, Pol Pot, Mao, and the other mass murderers of the 20th century who didn't believe, whether the culture of the West, which for centuries stood for so much and brought the world so much progress in many areas, especially in human dignity, and now stands for almost nothing and is self-destructing, the list is endless. Faith is now on the defense, is now off the defense stand. If anything, it wishes to call her former prosecutor to the defense stand. I look forward to the defense. I could only hope it doesn't use the same old arguments because honestly, it rings hollow. Disclaimer, this is not a rant on atheists, the people, many who are wonderful on many levels. This is about ideology. Because in the real world, we should be able to argue about ideas. So please keep your responses ideas-based, not personal. If you choose to get personal, then you've truly proven my case. Faith in an omnipresent creator and in his providence stands ready to prosecute. Reality has proven her innocence, and more so, her indispensability. I rest my case. That was my rant. And I want to explain my rant, and I'll tell you why. I just woke up this morning and it suddenly hit me. You know, last 2 weeks ago, my family and I came on and showed what it means to be Orthodox and what it means to live a Haredi lifestyle. And I've been watching on Facebook and, you know, following on WhatsApp, people's ideas of how to make the world a better place and solve racism, etc. And yet what I find is, and I think what inspired me was my sister. I was chatting to my sister Khani last night. And we're like, why is talking about faith still a defensive position? Like, I'll give you an example. Okay, I'm looking at the people here. I'd imagine most of you believe, or almost all of you believe in God. But chances are if I would get up in the front of the community, even my community, but especially if I go to the wider community out there, when I declare that I'm a believer, and then I declare I'm Orthodox, and then I even declare I'm Haredi, I'm right away defending 3 positions. How could you believe? Even if you believe, why do you have to be Orthodox? And if you're Orthodox, why in the world did you have to choose to be Haredi? So it's almost as if the more you adopt faith in your life as a fundamental of your worldview, the more you're on the defensive. So I have to explain. I have to okay, I know that science says so. However, there's another position. I mean, don't you realize that this beautiful baby must come from somewhere? You'll find that often talking about faith, even when we're very certain about it, we're sharing it from a place of defensive position. And what my rant really is I'm actually sick and tired of faith having to defend itself. Honestly, at this stage, I think atheism has to defend itself. And again, let me clarify, I'm not talking about atheists. I'm not talking about people here. I'm talking about ideas. I strongly believe, and we've shared this before, that in a good world, in a healthy world, we never attack people, but we feel very comfortable to attack ideas. In other words, even when it comes to race, I feel fundamentally that attacking a person for their race is ridiculous. Not ridiculous, it's evil. However, I'm entitled to challenge a culture. In other words, if I find that a culture of people act a certain way, then I could sit there saying, I think the culture is wrong, and in no way am I offending the person. In other words, if I think that, let's say, there's a problem in certain ideas of Christianity, and I could sit there saying, I fundamentally disagree with certain principles of Christianity, Islam, whatever, religion, culture, I don't like Arabic culture. In no way does that mean I'm attacking Arabs. It means that certain things of the culture. Now, the reason I feel comfortable to attack a culture is because a culture is not something you're born with. If I attack you with something you're born with, then fundamentally I'm attacking you because you can't change it. You were born into a certain race, a certain gender, a certain sexual orientation. You were born that way. So if I attack you based on that, then that is fundamentally evil, because what I'm saying is that I hate you for who you are. However, if you happen to adopt an ideology and I disagree with that, if I attack the ideology, I'm not attacking you because fundamentally you could change your ideology. And if you want to defend your ideology, then go ahead and defend it. But I'm not attacking you because you and your ideology are two different things. If you could divorce the ideology, then it's my right to attack it, obviously with respect. But in other words, I have nothing against any person. I'll be honest, even a Nazi. Okay, the problem is that we're defining a Nazi. I have a problem with Nazism. There happen to be people, very few, who are Nazis who not necessarily agreed with Nazism. They just signed up to the party. The point is, my issue is with an ideology. Obviously, the people who then perpetrated the crimes must be given the consequence of for their crimes. But their crimes came from an ideology. If I disagree with certain things in the local culture, in the South African Jewish culture, and I attack them, which, as you know me by now, I'm pretty outspoken, I don't feel in any way people should get defensive. On the contrary, I'm attacking a cultural thing. It's not about you. You could totally change your culture. If you think you don't want to change it, then defend it. Or don't defend it. But ultimately, if I tease a cultural thing, if I'm a commentator on social norms and social issues, and people get offended, for me, that boggles my mind, because that's fundamentally against free speech. I believe that, often there's a big conversation about how free should people's speech be. And I believe free speech pretty much means you could talk about ideas as far as you want, as long as you don't attack people. The moment your ideology, your thoughts, your speech starts attacking people, then you know that it's no longer free speech. So, for example, it is not okay, even in a free speech society, to come and sit there saying that people of a certain race are less than. I don't think that's governed under free speech, because that's evil. You're attacking a person for who they are. However, I have ultimate right in a free speech society to sit there saying I disagree with that culture. I think that the culture is raising, I don't know, suicide bombers. That culture is raising poverty, whatever I issue out of the culture. And the other person could counter and sit there saying the culture is not the case. But when you're attacking a culture, you're discussing something which isn't a person. No person is forced to be part of a culture. They have free choice to out-culture themselves out of that culture. And therefore, I feel it's fair. So, for example, I have nothing against homosexual people, if that's the way they're born. However, I feel free as a religious figure to discuss homosexuality as an idea, not as a person, and to sit there sharing my views whether doing it in real life is okay or not okay. It's not politically correct to talk about it, and that's not the topic of my share today, but ultimately, I don't see why talking about a idea and a behavior is the same about talking about people. I am 100% accepting of every person, regardless of their decisions. At the same time, I could disagree with their decisions, and in no way am I judging them as a person. I see them as a wholesome, good person. However, I disagree with the decision they made. Because again, I'm not arguing with the person, I'm arguing with the decision. Now, that was a very long introduction to a very basic point. What's my basic point? That when I'm going on a rant, when I'm sharing a worldview, when I'm sharing an idea, and I'm sure Carrie's thinking right now, Rabbi, did you have enough sleep last night? Why are you so angry? No, I'm fine. Actually, I had a very good night's sleep. I hope I'm not coming across angry. If I am, apologies. I woke up and I realized that as a believer in today's day and age, as a faith person, I have to stop being so defensive. In other words, I don't think faith is what has to defend itself. I think atheism does, not atheists, but atheism. Because honestly, atheism, and not the person, ideology again, I want you to explain me how in the last 200 years you've brought peace to this world. I want you to explain how ever since the West has adopted your ideology, it's become a better place. How ever since it's adopted your ideology, it's made people's lives better. How ever since your ideology has become the dominant culture in the West, you've saved relationships and you've created healthier homes and you've created better fathers and better mothers. I want you to defend yourself. Why is it that in our day and age, faith still feels the need to be on the defensive, as if it has the weaker hand? Because by definition, if you're defensive, what you're saying is, I don't have the strong hand. Because if I felt confident, I would be the prosecution. What am I defending? Why in today's day and age, and I'll be honest, with the risk of over dramatizing what's going on, I believe that what you're seeing in the United States, a lot of it, and I'm not only talking about the race issue, I'm talking about the coronavirus response, I'm talking about the politics of 2016 and the politics leading into 2020. At the risk of sounding over dramatized, let me take a deep breath. I believe we're watching slowly but surely the collapse of a culture. I don't know if it's going to fully collapse, but I believe that the West is collapsing on itself, not because China, not because Russia, but because the West itself no longer knows what it stands for. When I think of the West and its heyday, I think about World War II, when they knew who they were fighting for, when they fought against evil and they were able to pinpoint evil. When I talk about the West, I talk about the foundation of the United States and its Declaration of Independence and its Declaration of Rights and its Constitution based on religious humanist principles. When I say the collapse of the West, I'm even talking about the idealism of 1994 and the Constitution of South Africa, which built itself on such high ideals and yet struggles to live up to those ideals. And it's not faith that's getting in the way of ideals. I would argue it's the contrary. That it is when we drop faith, when there is no creator, when there is no objective morality, when there is no right or wrong that's objective, that's when things collapse. We live in a time when nothing is objectively wrong. And you cannot live in such a world. Because what happens is and again, I could talk about America. I'll be honest, I've lived in South Africa for 10 years. I still don't get the South African politics. It's not it's not how I grew up. I still don't get it. The only politics I claim to understand a bit is American and Israeli politics. I don't know, somehow I understand what's going on, but in South African politics, I just don't get it. I don't get what each party stands for. If they stand for anything, I don't get it. But the point is, the new religion in most of the world is politics. If you're a Trump fan in the United States, that's a religious position because you will stick through to him through thick and thin. And if you're an anti-Trumper, then it's a religious position. You will take the left position on every single thing. That's religion. So in other words, it's not as if the world is irreligious today. I think the world is very religious. It's just not religion based on faith. It's religion based on other things. I believe being a sport fanatic, not playing sport, watching sport, is a religion. Being a fashionista is a religion. When you take anything too far, it's religious. That's why, if you realize the last 20 minutes, I haven't used the word religion. I've used the word faith because I'm not necessarily pro-religion. I'm pro-faith. And the foundation is faith. And if the faith leads you to a certain religious practice, then fine. But religion independent of faith means nothing to me. On the contrary, it could destroy the world, just like anything else. Any religion could destroy the world. Because again, I don't see religion as connected to faith. I see religion as anything that you give yourself over wholeheartedly, and you lose your objective mind, and you become a diehard fan of something. That's religion. And therefore, I believe that there is nobody on this planet, or almost nobody, who's irreligious. You're religious. You might be religious about education. You're absolutely obsessed that your kids need an education, and you cannot see a counter argument, which is something we discussed over the years, how I don't necessarily buy into it, the education religion. But let's say that's your religion. It's a religion. That's my point. Because rarely are you hearing people being nuanced about it. If you're a fan of a certain celebrity, a certain actor, actress, sport, singer, if your fanhood goes a bit too far, that becomes a religion. I'll be honest, if you worship anybody, you could worship your husband. Well, usually that only happens in the first year or two. I'm talking to most of you are married for longer than a year, so chances are none of you worship your husbands. But remember that phase. Or your kid is now worshiping their girlfriend or boyfriend, thinking that they're the best thing that's ever happened since sliced bread. That's a religion. That's worship. Everybody is worshiping something. You could be worshiping your phone. You could be worshiping a religion. In other words, Judaism could be your religion and not your faith, and that's a problem. I don't like the word religion. I really don't. Because religion doesn't have anything to do with faith. Religion is something that means you give yourself over wholeheartedly to something and you lose your objective mind. And for me, I'm not religious that way. I'm a faith person, but I still think with my mind open. I attempt to, at least. You might say that the mere fact I'm sitting in front of you with a beard and a yarmulke with a white shirt shows that I don't think for myself. Fair enough. But ultimately, I don't see religion as an aspiration for this world. I see faith. The idea that there's a God who created the world for a reason, with intention, and then gave guidelines for this world, how to live, whether it's the 7 Noahide laws, whether it's the 10 commandments. And God gave a manual for humanity, Jewish world and non-Jewish world, how to live. That, for me, is the solution of mankind. That we all choose to believe that this world was created with intention, not by mistake. Because a world that's created by mistake cannot have meaning and cannot teach itself morality. And morality will change every single day based on the whims of society, because morality is coming based on the minds of people. So, for example, in the eyes of many people today, being moral means you get on the knee and you say Black Lives Matter. Again, I'm not here to say that it is or isn't, but just because a week ago a man was killed doesn't mean that now you're immoral if you don't say something and you're only moral if you say something. That's the way the world works. The world moves, and every week based on certain things, there's a moral position. If you accept it, then you're a moral person. If you don't accept it, then you're an immoral person. But fundamentally, I believe that morality has to be judged by an objective truth. And I'll be honest, my objective truth is that murder is wrong. So therefore, what happened to George Floyd is wrong. My objective truth is that all life matters, including Black lives, including Jewish lives, including Arab lives, including gay lives, including any life. Every life matters. Yeah, Because again, that's not my ideology. That's an ideology. God says, "Ki b'tselem Elokim barata Adam." He created the human being with the image of God. But unless you could base morality on an objective truth from God, morality will change every single day. Every day it will change. 3 months ago, it was moral to lock down the world for coronavirus. Now it's moral to open the world because it's destroying people's lives, economy. Then, and just watch, until we have a vaccine, every week there's going to be a new moral stance about how to deal with coronavirus. Because again, we don't have a book. We're not looking towards an objective truth. So many people are asking, why aren't the rabbis rushing to open the shuls? Actually, tomorrow there's a meeting. I'm not sure what the meeting will be. But last week there was a meeting with the rabbis and together with the chief and the Beth Din, and the decision was, although the law allows us to open, we're not opening. Why? Because again, the government has allowed us to, and that's fine, but ultimately we're going to base our decision based on halacha, based on objective truth. And what does halacha say? And let's give ourselves 2 weeks to research that to make sure we make the decision correctly. In our world, more than ever, in a world that's so confused, I'll be honest, when I see Russia, China laughing at the US right now with the George Floyd, obviously, it's like extremely self-righteous on behalf of Russia and China to be laughing at the West as if they have anything about human rights, etc. But ultimately, there's something that bothers me in the laughter. You know why? Because there's a truth to it. They're seeing a culture fall apart. The problem is that they're misinterpreting. They think that the reason America is falling apart is because of democracy. And they're trying to use this as an opportunity to punt their worldview of autocracy. Whether it's Russia, whether it's China, they're trying to argue their point of view. But they're wrong. I believe America is not falling apart because of democracy. I think America is falling apart because it lost its soul. The answer is not to go back to an autocracy, to go back to dictators. The answer is to regain faith, to believe in objective truth, that these truths are self-evident. By the way, in the first draft, it didn't say self-evident. It said these things are true, or divine truths, I believe. But then at that time, I think Thomas Jefferson, one of them changed it. He felt that was too religious. So he said self-evident. But a culture that's created with facts that every person is deserving of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That is a culture that can create a success. Obviously, did America have faults in its beginning? Yes. Was slavery a contradiction to its Declaration of Independence? 100%. Has that culture made a million mistakes? Yes. But when I compare it to other cultures around the world, it made a lot less mistakes because it was founded on a certain principle. And eventually, it did release slavery, and eventually it did try to solve its own issues. What's happening now is not Donald Trump's destroying America or Joe Biden's destroying America. It's not Europe is collapsing because there's too many Muslims or other controversies. Like when the 2016 election happened, everyone started blaming Russia for interfering. And I'll be honest, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe it was true. I'm not a fake news fellow. However, I think they lost the bigger picture. Russia cannot collapse America. Only America can collapse America. Just like the Turks didn't, the Ottoman Empire didn't destroy the Roman Empire and the empires of old. Rome collapsed and allowed for the new Muslim rulers to find an avenue. No society collapses from without, and this is a truth that's been known to historians for thousands of years. Egypt didn't collapse because of the new culture. Greece didn't collapse because of Rome. Greece collapsed because of Greece, and Rome collapsed because of Rome. And communism didn't collapse because of Reagan. Communism collapsed because of communism. An ideology collapses on itself when it loses its ethos. North Korea will collapse one day because it's a fundamentally flawed ideology. It might take longer because he's keeping his people ignorant and he's literally killing people for thinking, but eventually it will collapse because it's unnatural to the human condition. But cultures never collapse from without. They collapse from within. So, people will often, let's bring it back locally, Jewish South Africa. Oh gosh, there's so much violence, there's so much corruption. The biggest threat to the Jewish community in South Africa has nothing to do with violence or corruption. It's its own faith in itself. Does it believe it has a future? And for me, that terrifies me because the average, not the average, many South African Jews don't believe in their future. It's not because of anything else, because as I've shared many times, each decade, South African Jews find a new excuse to emigrate. Violence, corruption, apartheid's immoral, apartheid is collapsing, and that's scary. The court cases, the demonstrations, every decade there was another excuse why people left. Fundamentally, it comes from one flaw. People don't believe in the future of this country. South African Jews, on the most part, are very uncertain about their future. Unlike other countries, which also have their issues, but not every time an issue rises, you don't hear the whole America saying, now let's emigrate out of the United States. Even though America seems to be in quite a bigger mess than we are in now. Because, I don't know, somehow it became part of the South African culture that when something goes wrong, we all talk about immigration. In Israel, people don't talk about immigration. Even Australia, they don't talk about immigration that way. America, they don't talk. Europe doesn't even talk about it the way we do. But we, no, boop, immigration, it's the solution. Oh my gosh, Ramaphoria failed. Let's go, let's emigrate. I'm like, guys, enough. The problem is not outside, the problem's within. My biggest issues are not the country I'm living in, not even the community that I'm living in. Obviously, it's important for me. My biggest issue is, Levi, how are you as a husband? How are you as a father? How are you a decent human being? How are you moral? How do you treat your kids? What kind of relationship do you have with your kids? That's the most important question in my life right now. And it should be. And hopefully it will stay that way. But the question of like, Levi, is the South African Judaism have a future? Ultimately, it has a very little impact on me. For me, the most important thing is my nucleus, my own mental health, my family, etc. Because my success in life and my failure in life will be based on that. How I take care of my emotional, physical, mental health, spiritual health, the relationships I develop with my children and my wife and my family, the relationships I build with my community. That's what matters. The issue in our lives has rarely anything to do with outside of us. It's inside. I am my own problem. I am my own solution. So how does that connect to faith? Because I believe that if I am my own solution, the solution for me, Levi, I can only talk for me, is faith. Working on my faith, building a better relationship with my God, building a more committed relationship to objective truths, to ask myself every single day, day in and day out, what does God want from me, not what do I want for myself? As a youngster, I was a person that was very consumed with inner thoughts. In other words, who am I? Why am I? Where am I? Am I talented? Am I not talented? Self-esteem issues, etc. And at some stage, it took a long time. I mean, a long time, 10, 15 years, to wake up one day and realize, I knew it, but I didn't realize it. Like one day you actually become aware of the truth. And what did I become aware of? That Levi has to stop thinking about what he wants out of life, and he has to start thinking what life wants out of him. He has to stop asking what he needs in life, and he has to ask himself, why is he needed here? But you could only ask that if you believe that fundamentally you're needed, that someone put you here for a purpose. You see, I want to qualify this before we finish the share. It's very important for me. When I say faith, the reason I'm talking about it is not because of religion. It's not. It's because if you don't believe that a God created the world with intention, then fundamentally you believe that your life has no intention other than the one you make it, but that's not objectively true. In other words, you were born by mistake. because sperm met that egg. That's all the reason you were born. And if that's the only reason you were born, then it's so hard for me to convince you that your life has meaning. But if you believe that God put you in this world, obviously through a biological process, but he decided that you'll be born, and he decided your gender, and he decided your personality, and he put you into this world in a certain circumstance and guided your life in a certain direction, then you could believe that your life has meaning and intention. The issue with a godless world fundamentally is that it's a world going nowhere. It comes from nowhere and it's going nowhere. It was created by a fluke. It is a fluke and it will always be a fluke. It has no intention. A world without intention is like a person who does things without thinking. It's like my child. I mean, I love my baby, but my 2-year-old's going through a serious, terrible twos moment. We're pretty much screaming and shouting, laughing, screaming, shouting. And at some stage, when it's your first child, you actually think, Babele, talk to me. What's on your mind? What's going on? Shame. Eventually, you realize the kid is just going through terrible twos, whatever that is. I don't understand the full psychological process, but what I do know is there's very little intention. It's pure madness. Okay, it's pure madness. And what you have to do is just distract them, give them a sweet, give them a cookie, take them out, take them on a walk, and just get them to forget, because ultimately they have no idea why they're having a meltdown. Sometimes it's hunger and tiredness, and sometimes it's no reason at all, just a meltdown. And not only terrible twos, teenagers as well, the same thing. You try to sit there figuring out, what's the intention that my teenager's talking? There's no intention. The kid's mad. The kid is transitioning from a child to an adult. During that time, the mind is forming new pathways. It hasn't formed it yet, so the brain is not fully formed. And therefore, they're not acting with intention. There is no agenda. But imagine you try to base your decisions and your life based on teenagers' agendas, based on teenagers' You can't build a life like that. Why? Because the teenager doesn't know why they're doing what they're doing. That's why we rarely, never in a healthy society marry off a teenager, because they don't know what they're doing. And we make sure that we keep the alcohol away from them, and we make sure that they come home at a responsible time, because their life is lacking full intention. I'm not saying every teenager, but many. And in a way, that's the way it's supposed to be. Teenagers are supposed to be teenagers, and then they become adults. It's a process. But when a person's living a stage of their life like a terrible twos or a teenager without intention, and we're sitting and saying, so what's the meaning of what they're doing? There is no meaning. It's madness. It's the same thing like going to the world and saying, there's no God. This world is just a random mixture of biology, physics, hormones, a challenge that nobody could have concocted in their worst imagination. And yeah, let's try to make the world a better place till it falls apart. And then we'll try to make it a better place as well. And each day we'll decide what a better place looks like, because 100 years ago, a better place maybe looked like a place with racism. Today, it looks like a place without racism. Tomorrow, it looks like a place, 100 years ago, was a place where there was no abortion. Today is a world with abortion. So the truth is that even when you say you want to make the world a better place, tikkun olam, if you can't even agree what a better place looks like, because every single day you decide that better is a different thing, you can never create a world that you don't even know what the world is you want to create. I saw that there was this big thing saying, there was a demonstration next to a Churchill monument, and they spray painted on it, Churchill was a racist. Now, might very well be he was a racist, but ultimately, for his time, he pretty much saved the world from the biggest racist on the planet. So yeah, maybe Churchill was a racist, but compared to Hitler, who he defeated, he wasn't. But ultimately, if in the eyes of people in 2020, Churchill was an evil, was a menace. Could you imagine what the world would look like without Churchill? Or at least England and the West. Again, I'm not justifying. He was imperfect. He was a very imperfect person. But what was considered a good person for 1945 is not considered good in 2020 anymore. And then in 2100, God knows, all of us will be considered evil. We'll be considered a bunch of chauvinistic, racist, pathetic human beings, because morality is going to change. Now, again, I'm not saying that I'm not justifying evil. But what I'm saying is, if the world cannot define what it means to make the world a better place, and each week it changes, then we have a big problem, because we're never going to make the world a better place, and we actually have no reason to, because there's no objective truth that guides us that way. That was my rant. I will now go have a wonderful cup of tea. Try to calm myself down. Just kidding. I'm totally fine. Thank you so much for joining. God bless you all. And Mirz Hashem, yeah, which should only be good news for each and every one of us. Amen. And thank you so much for joining. I hope you could join the youth program tonight.